Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today I have with me Deon Haar. Deon is the co-founder of Talent United and has over 35 years of recruitment agency experience. And Deon is on a specific mission to shake up the idea of we've always done it this way, specifically within the recruitment industry. So thanks so much for joining me for a conversation today, Deon. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic to dive into. It's an interesting industry to kind of dissect and explore, I feel. But I guess to start with, what drew you into the recruitment industry in the first place? Like, what was something that stood out to you that you liked about it?
Honestly, very little. And I think that's the case with almost anyone working recruit. I don't know anybody who's gone, I want to be a recruiter. They fall into it one way or another. My story, the short version of my story is I moved over here from New Zealand for a job that didn't really end up coming to fruition. So I was here. I started applying for jobs. I didn't even know what a recruitment agency did. So when this company rang and said, come in for a chat, I was like, cool, I'm going in for an interview to work here. And then they said, oh, no, we're actually recruiting for, it was a financial services company. I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And then we got talking and they said, what do your old roles do, which are basically sales and writing ads. And then they were like, well, hang on, that's basically recruitment. So have you ever thought about recruitment? I said, I know nothing about it. What happens? And they told me, and they offered me a position. And then I got talking to, through that process, got talking to a few what we call rec to recs, so people who recruit recruiters for recruiters, and learned a little bit more about the industry, and ended up being interviewed and offered a role with what turned out to be a really good company. And now what I know about the industry, I'm really grateful that I got that job with them, and not many of the others. Then I ended up just 7 months in with just very little experience, thinking like a lot of recruiters do, I could do this myself. And so I did. And I just set up myself and got going. And that was, that was 16 odd years ago. And here we are.
I mean, that's kind of cool because like the level of self-belief that is needed to kind of go like, I can do this myself, but also to actually do it, that feels like all of the skills that you had beforehand were transferable into recruitment. Obviously, like, the sales and the writing up job ads and everything, like the ads and everything, like all of that were transferable. You mentioned that you were grateful that you landed in the particular place that you did. Tell me about like the challenges that you see in leadership, or how the communication is generally carried out in recruitment.
Yeah, so I guess why I say that I'm grateful that I started there is I was well trained, but I was well trained by people who saw their team as individual people, not individual little revenue generators. And I think that, right across recruitment, there's a lot of companies where leadership is basically the enforcement of KPIs, and the adherence to KPIs, or the alternative is you lose your job, basically. And so like a lot of industries right now, and have been for the last few years, really struggling for talent, you just can't look at that anymore. You can't lead a recruitment business that way. And arguably you can't lead any business really that way anymore, not should you have been doing it in the first place. But I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that our industry has from a leadership point of view, is really now adjusting to the shortage of talent and adapting how you work, and obviously where you work, because that's all very trendy at the moment to talk about, but how you work and how you lead and how you hold people accountable in the environment at the moment where, like we were just talking briefly off air before we come on, it's, there's a lot of jobs and not a lot of people. And so you've really got to look at, well, what is in it for these people? What's in it for them to come and work for me? And the answer is not, well, they get a job. We're not in the midst of the GFC now. Being able to offer someone a job is not a massive point of difference. So you've really got to dive into, how you lead in a way that allows people to get as much as they can from their job.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like it's a really good thing to highlight as well, because there's a kind of mentality that I feel like comes along with, well, they get a job, they should be grateful. One, it assumes that people aren't grateful.
Yep.
or that they're making these choices out of desperation and necessity. And like, I get in some instances that would be the case for people, but at the same time, is that the kind of society that we want to be growing into or moving away from, right?
Yeah, like the idea of being grateful for having a job is interesting in itself, because if most people had the choice, they wouldn't have a job. They have a job because they need money to live a lifestyle that they want to lead, whether that's quite basic or very, extravagant. But the concept of having a job is really, it's really not something to be grateful for anymore. And I know that's probably seems a little odd, because there are a lot of people out there who don't have work who want it. And being, those people who are unemployed against their wishes, there's a lot of them struggling, and they're doing it really tough. So I don't mean to suggest that, just by and large, having a job isn't something to be grateful for, but from an employer perspective and a talent acquisition and talent attraction perspective, being able to offer someone a job is not enough for a lot of companies in a lot of industries. There's got to be a lot more to it than that.
Do you think that there's a correlation there between employers that set that as their standard rather than like aligned values or understanding the mission or whatever it is, right? Like, rather than having those arguably more important things as the standard, they have, well, we can offer people jobs, so we want people that are grateful for the job. Do you think that there's a correlation between employers who offer that as the standard and who don't actually maybe thrive as well, or have a high turnover, or I
would imagine it's a 100% correlation between companies who just believe that somebody should be immensely grateful and they should rush to this company purely because they have a job that's vacant, versus trying to lead and manage in such a way where people can get as much out of their job as they can. And I think that probably does reflect directly onto staff turnover, culture, and ultimately profits. I mean, if 5 minutes on Google, you'll find just unlimited research on the correlation between company culture and employee happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment and overall profit and profitability. So I think the correlation is 100% through and through. And you can imagine if there's a company that's hiring and the benefits that they are offering a potential candidate is the fact, well, we have a job, so you should be happy. I mean, you can imagine, by and large, what that company is going to be like to work for. So.
Yeah, like I feel like we're transported back to the 50s or something, where it's like, whereas the job is the status itself, right? Like, rather than the quality of life. And quality of life is something I've been speaking a lot about with clients, in the sense of like, you can have all of these things, but what's the quality of life that you're living? Like, what's the point of it if you just run off your feet, or if you have a job but you're unhealthy because there's these expectations that might be there, because there's the idea that you should just be grateful for that rather than actually being in a healthy workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's understanding the talent market these days from a marketing perspective. We talk about here at Talent United, we talk a lot about how we're not so much just a 100% recruitment business anymore. We're almost as much a marketing and technology company as we are recruitment, and recruitment's kind of the end result of us getting that marketing and technology right. And you've really got to look at, well, who's the target market of what we're putting out there, and in this case, it's a vacancy or a job ad, and ultimately going, what do these people want? What are they looking for? Because, you know, with the exception of someone who doesn't have a job and who's desperate to get employed, nobody wants just a job. There's a myriad of things that they want, and you have to understand what it is that those people want so that you can market a position or an opportunity, or even mold an opportunity so that it fits in line with what the people that you're pitching it at are looking for.
Yeah, that's yes, all the yes to that. How do you recommend these places? Like, do you recommend that they ask certain questions, or how do you find out, or you or the royal you or them, but how do you find out what it is that people want?
Yeah, look, I think depending on the size of your organisation, you can ask your existing team what they want and see if there's aspects of the role that they find really beneficial. But the other thing is when you're getting, because you're right, it is hard to, you know, if you're a growing business and you say, okay, we need our own accountant. What do accountants want? Well, we don't have one, so we can't ask one. We can't ask the market. Who knows? But I think when you're getting into the recruitment process, if you're asking the questions of people about what it is that they want, then you can either mold a role to include as many of those things as practical, or if you'll narrow it down to a select group of people that you want to progress with, that you're really interested in, then you can start to see if there's ways that you can work what they're looking for into a role. And, you know, and it's obviously got to go both ways. You can't just give up everything and have it a free for all. But you know, like for example, one of our girls in the office here, she rides horses. And we were trying to get her to join us, and we said, you know, what's your ideal role like? And she said, a little bit of flexibility. So we said, okay, tell me about that. She said, I go and ride my horses, you know, in the mornings, and to be able to come in and start work an hour late 1 or 2 days a week would be amazing. And for us, it was like, well, we can do that easy. That's no problem. And so she couldn't do that in her old role, really. So it was really significantly important for her to be moving to a role where she was able to do that, because it comes back to your quality of life, right? What does she want in her job? What does she want in her day other than just her work? She really wants to go and ride that horse in the morning. So it was relatively easy for us to be flexible enough to make that happen. So it's just a complete win-win, you know. But you've got to be asking those questions of people to find out what it is that they're looking for. Otherwise, you know, you're kind of trying to shoot at a target that you don't know what it is. So you're probably going to miss it, you know, 9 times out of 10. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, as well as, like, it's like almost like the difference is for employers to recognize who it is that they want and then have the conversation, rather than narrowing down who they might choose based on who's the least quote unquote effort, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I mean, with flexibility, because that is a bit of a hot topic it's been really a topic for years, but COVID kind of like thrust it into the spotlight as well. But like, what's your stance on companies that are really hardline about these are the hours you work for a role that doesn't necessarily have to, like, that isn't on the phones, or doesn't have to be there for those specific hours?
Look, I think you can be hard and fast if you want. You're just going to narrow down the talent pool. You know, you're just going to give yourself less people to choose from. I'm working a role today. I'm working on a role for a good client of ours, and the role is they've got to be in the office when people are coming in. Right, so they've got to be, the doors open at this time, they close at this time. You've got to be there that whole time. There's not really a great degree of flexibility. In other jobs, you can offer an immense amount of flexibility, and most roles are somewhere in the middle. So I think you have to look at why if you're demanding people are coming in, or you're suggesting that you really want them in. Why is that? Because if it's coming from a lack of trust, then that's a real problem. And I remember reading, there was, as you probably know, when COVID first hit, there was just stuff on the internet everywhere about working from home, and I might come back to the office. And a lot of people were posting things along the lines of, if you trusted these people to employ them in the first place, trust them to work from home. And I think by and large, that's pretty true. Counter to that is, I guess, our office, where we have a couple of people in Sydney that work for us, and if anyone in our team here needs to work from home, that's for a day or whatever, that's absolutely no problem with that. But I prefer everybody to be together where possible, just because I think you learn a lot about, and I still learn a lot now about what we do by hearing other people on the phone, hearing conversations, or you get off the phone or something happens and you can just sit with someone briefly and go, this has just happened, what would you do, or what would you have said? Or I think there's a lot of that corporate culture that is, in some ways, it's being lost by the fact that people are spread out so much. And Zoom lunches and Zoom Friday drinks and virtual catch-ups they're all well and good if that's the best that we can do. Then I don't believe they're as good as the real thing. Everybody's sitting down around a table, having a lunch or a drink and having a laugh and getting to know, getting to know your team. For a lot of people, that's all they can do. Lockdowns and, that sort of stuff, that's all that they can do. But I think come back to your question, I think if you're being hard and fast about, no, this job is done from the office, well, for now, that's your prerogative. Whether it stays that way or not, I mean, I guess that's a question for fair work over time. But and if it's because you don't trust your people, then why are they on your team in the first place?
Well, I think you raise a very good differentiator there, just in explaining your answer, because yes, if it's about not being able to trust the team, people feel that anyway, and it's almost like micromanaging. People will feel the lack of trust, so it affects performance anyway. But what you said about your preference is, the way you explain that is clearly it's about your values of connection. Right.
Absolutely.
And there is definitely something to be said about the incidental conversations, whether they're about work or personal, that happen in an office, or in a together environment anyway. But your reasoning isn't based on control. From what I hear is, it's not based on control. It's not based on lack of trust, because you're willing to sort of go let's, if you need to work from home for a day, great, awesome, do it.
Of course.
But it's because you've connected it to this value of connection, of going, so you can explain that to people. And I think that's a difference that comes into employer-employee relationships that is more and more and more important, is not having employers having to justify everything, but having them communicate more about, we mentioned before, values, and going, what is important and why is this decision important in relation to the value?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it gets everyone on board for the same mission then.
For sure. Yeah, it's as I said, there's just so much lost, I think, in having everybody working remotely. Definitely can be done. I know people have been doing it for a decade or more. And running great businesses. It can absolutely be done. But I don't know. I like the idea of a team. We refer to everybody as our team, and I like them in here. They're great people. We enjoy each other's company, and I just think we operate better. But if for whatever reason, as I said, we've got two people in Sydney who work from home 100% of the time, and they smash it, and they're good on them. We trust them to do the job, and they do it. So
and I think, COVID notwithstanding as well, I think as long as there's measures in place that allow for that togetherness too, I know that I work with clients that are largely, largely online, but I have it set up so every quarter it's let's get together, wherever in the country, again, COVID notwithstanding, but wherever in the country you are, or in the world even, let's have a something every, however often, depending on where they are, to actually get together and to like do the in-person thing rather than it completely by distance. And
Yeah.
and I think there's been a resilience in how companies have shown up with COVID in that way, because sometimes it's just like you said, you know, that's just the option that they have and that they have had for a year and a half, you know. So I think it's important for them to express the values in that the way that you have, and be able to come back and go, yeah, and this is why we're deciding this, you know, when we have the choice to, this is why. And people generally tend to get more on board that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also, I think you've also got to look at who the people are as well from an experience perspective. You know, we're just in the process at the moment of hiring somebody, and that person is quite inexperienced in what we do, and we're fine because we want to train them up. But trying to train them up and having them try to learn the job remotely, I think is just so much more difficult than just being around and seeing and hearing people do it. So.
Yeah, I've read a couple of articles lately as well about workers. I think they're in the UK, but they're coming back to the office because they were hired during COVID, during lockdown, and so they're coming to an office that they've never worked in, but they're realizing the difference in the relationships that they thought they had with their colleagues when they see their colleagues who have met, you know, in person before, and they're like, oh, it's still different, and I still feel like I'm the new girl on the block, even though I've been around for 12 months already. Like it's
absolutely,
it's discombobulating. Like it's just really like just jarring as well, for that matter. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What's your ideal vision as far as like the leadership and communication in recruitment goes? What is your vision of how that could be moving forward in the industry?
That's a great question. Look, we always tend to think that like for the most part, and we're a reasonably small recruitment firm on the big scheme of things. So I think that the impact that any one small firm can have on the industry is relatively limited, and equally how we're going or not going is not really a reflection of how the recruitment industry or the recruitment market is going. So I kind of think, as much as I'd like the recruitment industry to change a bit, because I'm in it and I'm passionate about it, and I would like people to not see recruitment firms as they see a lot of them, we sort of tend to focus our efforts more on how we do things rather than the whole industry does it. But I think by and large across the industry, you know, as I said before, it's been for a long time in industry that's been ruled by KPIs. And, you know, and I know we talk to recruiters sometimes through our own interview processes, and they ask about that, and we say, look, we're not really a firm that, you know, manages by KPIs. And there's almost like a palpable relief that they're not going to be held to, you know, you have to do 20 of these and 10 of these and 5 of these. And, you know, as I said to you in an earlier conversation, the stories I've heard, honestly, that curl your hair, the way some of these businesses are run. So I think, you know, if anything needs to change around that across the industry, it's probably just giving people a little bit more trust and autonomy, and managing for and towards their output rather than their daily activity. Because, you know, with the very best of intentions, if you have to do 20 of something in a day, and for a very good reason you only do 5, well, I mean, that shouldn't be held against you. You know, you shouldn't be stopped from leaving work at your normal finishing time because you don't have enough ticks in a particular box for the day. I mean, that, to me, that's just idiotic. That
is that actually what happens? Like they have to stay back until they like get the quantity. In
the worst cases, yes, absolutely. I've got a good friend who, would tell me on more than a small number of occasions there were tears in the office. There were doors were locked until you had made X number of calls or send out X number of resumes, etc. I mean, these stories float around for a reason. right? And it's,
I feel like there's a fair work issue there for sure, right?
I feel like that could go wrong in a lot of different ways.
Wow.
Hopefully that's the the really rare exception now, rather than the. I mean, it is the exception, but it's happened a fair bit, and I think that now we need to be working towards, well, what is the end result? What is the outcome that you're chasing? Or what is, what's the budget, or whatever the case is, and then managing against that, rather than the minutiae of you have to do X number of, meet all these KPIs every day, because our tricky formulas worked out that if you do that, well, then you'll get the result. But if it's people that are just unhappy and unengaged and unfulfilled and just really angry at the way you're treating them, they can do those KPIs, but they're not going to get the end result, because they're not going to do a good job, because I hate it.
Yeah, and also like it's a quantity over quality thing, it sounds like, and it's also going to reflect on the reputation of that particular company in the world, like whether it's job seekers or whatever, because they'll be like, oh, that guy was a dick, I don't want to deal with them, like that whole like, and people get really honest. Especially these days, like they'll share it, and whether or not, that's a whole different conversation of when that's warranted and when it's not, but like it's almost like you can't really keep expecting to get away with having staff that are overworked or unhappy, or that you're making them cry, or that because they're overworked they're just filling roles for the sake of filling roles, or like maybe not being their most optimal selves as far as the human to human relationship goes.
Absolutely. It's, I mean, even if you didn't care about those human beings, and when this is not good, from just a basic, people shouldn't be crying in our office.
No, like
even if you only wanted to look at it from a commercial perspective, when people are doing work that they just blatantly don't want to do, and it doesn't make sense, but it's in your manual, or it's in your, whatever it is, your process, that's not going to be a good outcome. You're not going to get the right kind of outcomes that you want.
And it translates to the external experience as well. 100%. Like anything internal communication, the leadership, the culture, everything that is set up translates like completely to the external experience, whether people recognize it or not. It absolutely does, because it's all the same. Yeah.
I mean, I've long asked companies when we start dealing with them, tell me about your use of recruiters, and they'll, one of their common complaints is they just send me all these people and they're not right. And I'm like, well, that's because
the KPIs
they have to get resumes out the door, literally in some cases, so they can go home. So that the quality of their work, it's more about volume than quality.
It reminds me of like the Centrelink process of like, you have to apply for this many jobs a week, or however, whatever it is set up as, but it doesn't mean that there's the quality or the actual appropriateness, and it just is this flow-on effect of wasting people's time, and
there's just no point doing it. If you're doing it without the proper care and attention, there's no point doing it in the first place. And if that's how you're managing, then I mean, surely you're only going one way, and that's down.
And like my memory of the recruitment industry is that it's a very like, it's not a small industry, but it's a small world. Like, everyone knows everyone kind of deal, or everyone's heard of everyone in a way, and that kind of, that can't be a good impression to have get out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, a lot of firms will work in their own specific niche, and so it's quite it's quite easy to become known for anything, really.
Literally anything, whether you want to be known for it or not.
Sure. Just as it's reasonably easy to be known to be quite a good operator, it's incredibly easy to be known as someone who just doesn't do a good job, and that people's propensity to share bad experience versus positive is, anywhere from 7 to 11 times as often. So if you're putting out bad work, you're gonna be found out. I mean, it's that simple. You're gonna be found out, and if you're a manager and you're encouraging your employees to do bad work by the way that you manage them, I mean, that whole thing, that's just broken. That just makes no sense to me. So
yeah. And it's like you said, like, even if it's not from that almost like, I guess, the moral perspective, if it look at it from that commercial perspective at the very least, because if that's what they care about, then they should care about it.
Yeah. But the same applies to, the same doesn't just apply to the recruitment industry. That I believe the same thing applies to almost every industry.
Oh yeah.
If you have a system or a process that is there just because it's there, or that just because this is how we do it, rather than, well, this is what works for the customer and our staff, and just gets a better end result. That's got to be the system or the process you use, not the one you design and just go, right, that's it. And whether it works or not, that's the way we do it. And that is, to me, that's just kind of the overriding insanity in any business is
I think it's this fear of what innovation means, like that it's going to mean a whole lot of extra work, or it's scary because it's change and it's different, and like, where's the proof? It's like, well, where is the proof of what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the, I mean, we probably covered it in some way, but if you could narrow it down to maybe one or two things, what are some of the biggest things you've learned in your time in the industry, or in your experience in general? Let's go with that.
Probably just how unpredictable human beings are. I mean, we're everybody's working with people. Most people are working with people in their jobs, but we're right in the people business, and we have two sets of clients, if you like, or two sets of stakeholders in any piece of work we're doing. We've got the client, and then we've got anywhere from 1 to X number of candidates, and anybody can change their mind at any time. So it's a very it's a very unpredictable place to be, and you've got to really understand what it is that people are looking to achieve. And then the better you can match that up, then the less unpredictability there is in the process. And
how do you?
Sorry.
No, you go. You keep going.
I was going to say probably the other one is the need for resilience, and again that's largely tied back to the unpredictability, because it's an ever changing job, and every piece of work in the job is changing all the time, and you can go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows with one email or one SMS or one phone call.
Well, that relates to the question I was about to ask anyway, is like, how do you manage that stress? Because that would be like, it sounds like it's a natural part of, well, it's a natural part of being like working with people, is that there is that unpredictability. And if you have resilience there, but how do you, if you were mentoring someone, how would you explain to them how to manage that kind of stress, because it is going to be there?
We say to people, don't let the highs get too high, because I think the higher you allow the highs to be when it goes well, then the lower the lows are when it doesn't go well. So try and keep a sense of equilibrium. We certainly celebrate everything we do, but don't let the highs get too high, and don't let the lows get the better of you either, because it's at the end of the day, for what we do, it's a placement, or it's if financially it's a fee that might fall over, and that's not cool. But at the end of the day, there's a much bigger picture here. We're working for a pool of clients. We're working with a great pool of candidates. We're putting people in jobs. We're, in some cases, and not just us, the industry in general. If you take someone from a job that they're stuck in, but they don't know how they can get out, or they don't want to commit the time to applying, and you can take them and you can put them somewhere in a great role, you can change their life. You really can. And the industry does that, and the industry helps companies grow all the time by finding people that they can't necessarily find themselves. And so there's kind of a bigger picture than just any one bad outcome or any one kick in the teeth. So don't let them get to you too much. I think that's probably the biggest thing is just try and keep an even keel as best you can.
I think that's a good lesson, like regardless of what industry you're in or just in life in general, it is a really good lesson to just be like, yeah, celebrate and like stay grounded, basically. Just, you know, keep the vision in mind and just keep going. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would you, or what do you do differently now versus what you did sort of at the beginning of your career?
Well, hopefully lots of things.
Yeah.
I went out on my own a fair while before I should have. But what do we do differently? We spend a lot of time now. We actively spend time almost every day working on the business, and not just how are we doing it, but how is our industry doing what it does, and how is that being perceived, and how is it working, and then what can we do if needed, what can we do to change the way that's being done? Because, you know, again, it is an industry like a lot where everybody does things the way they used to do them. And that's kind of a bugbear, you know, I think you mentioned before, that's kind of a bugbear of mine is you shouldn't be doing it, especially with the rate of technology in our industry and the rate of change in technology. There's no way we should be doing it the same way we were doing it 10 years ago. I mean, you know, you go back to 10, 15 years ago, we're putting ads in the paper. And then Seek came along.
Wow.
The holy grail. And then you put ads on there, you run ads on Seek, you get, you know, sometimes you get 0 applicants. So you're like, okay, well, we can't do it that way either. So we're sitting there going, well, how are we going to do it? And then we look at the whole process all the time of saying, how can we change what we do to make it better? And probably the other thing that I do now that I didn't do back then is involve other people in the business that have more experience than me. Which ironically, back then, that wouldn't have been that hard to find someone who had more experience than me. 5 minutes worth of experience, but I didn't go hunting those people. And maybe it was because, you know, you just start a business and you're like, right, you're up to your neck and you just paddling as hard as you can because you've got to, because now it's just
you're just like, I'm just in it, and holy shit, I just got to get through it.
I'm the cleaner and I'm the accountant and I'm the marketing manager and I'm the salesperson. But yeah, we certainly involve a few and have lots of conversations with people now about our industry and the way we do it that know more than we do.
Well, it sounds like a very, and I like in a good way, it sounds like a very scientific process, because science is always trying to prove itself wrong, right? So like it's always asking what's different, how can this be wrong, like basically. So I think it's a really, in itself, it's a really innovative way to approach things, because you're not going, we're doing something wrong. You're not doing that at all, but you're going, what, like you're asking the question. And a lot of, and like you've said, like a lot of industries, a lot of companies, a lot of people get caught in the, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. Instead of going, what else could we be doing?
And a lot of what we do comes from asking our clients and our candidates as well.
So you talk to people. You actually are, like, you talk to people.
Yeah, well, we're fortunate that part of doing our job is we talk to people all the time. Like, I don't know how many phone calls we make a day around here, but, you know, if you're doing the job right, you're talking to lots and lots of people. And by and large, those people will tell you what they think, especially the clients. You know, if there's a part of the process that they don't like or is a pain point, they'll tell you. And then I think a lot of people go, well, you know, it's just the way it is. Whereas we tend to be more like, well, okay, how can we do it differently? Why is it a problem? What are the alternatives? Is there an alternative that is actually achievable if we change the way that we do a certain thing? And, you know, we've got a couple of aspects of our business at the moment that we're completely changing the way we do it to respond to what our clients are saying. You know, you guys do great work, but it's still like this, you know, it's still really reactive. We're like, okay, well, how can we be as proactive as possible? So that's exciting. I like that too. It's you know, and I'm fortunate that my business partner here, he's very much like that too. He likes looking at how we can change things, and so it's exciting to be coming up with, you know, new ways. And you know, I don't think we're not leading the charge in the industry. Again, you know, as I said before, we're really just trying to change the way we do it. because
But that's
so we
one
can
cog in the wheel.
our
Like that's
candidate
one
better.
cog that once that
Yeah,
starts
that's right.
turning,
And maybe, maybe people will see the way we do certain things and think, oh, we could give that a try, or they might look at it and think, oh, well, that seems stupid, or whatever. That's cool. We'll do what we're doing, and if we can improve our clients and our candidates' experience in dealing with us, well, that's really all we can control. And if we can fix, or if we can not fix it, but if we can improve that, then happy days.
Well, yeah, that's it, right? Like it's almost like staying in your own lane because you're looking at your quality of life and what's satisfying and fulfilling for you in your work, and because you're in touch with those values, what's satisfying and fulfilling is making sure that other people are feeling more have the potential to feel more satisfied and fulfilled. And it's like it's modeling and it's leading by example as well.
Yeah.
So I think even that experience is enough. I think it can be easy when you're on a mission or when you get caught like you want to have a mission where you're like, and to want to change the whole world, right? Like to want to be like, I want to do all of this. And there's times where that motivation works, but there's also times where that can just work in the opposite of your favor. And if you just keep going, yep, I want this, but what I'm focusing on is this right here, it's huge. And it must be a huge, almost stress reducer of what it could be just by operating that way.
Yeah, look, the other thing that I personally push a lot is, you control the controllables. And so there's no point, and I probably had a period of time where I did this, but there's no point, I don't think, in getting too caught up about the way people perceive the industry, because I can't change. You can't change the way everybody in your sector operates.
No.
You can't do it in mine. You can't do it in yours. But
no.
we operate though. Then really that's, I guess it's not all that matters, but it's all that we can control. So it's all that's really worth us focusing on. And if us doing it differently somehow trickles down to some other people doing it differently or trying different things, and the industry's a little bit better, well, that's cool. That's good.
It's like you're just focusing on the 1%ers. You're like, what's sure. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation. I love getting into the nuances of these kinds of things as well. So people can find you on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else? I can include this all in the show notes and the captions as well. So
just connect up with me on LinkedIn, really. I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone around, people, their people, how they get them, how they keep them. That's a real passion of mine. So if anybody wants to have a chat, I'm always happy to have a chat. And if we can come up with an idea that might help, then great. And if they implement that, that's cool. And if they want us to do it or help do it, that's great too.
But, awesome.
By and large, it's LinkedIn where I spend most of
my you're day. Pretty active on there.
I pretty much live there. I probably spend more time on LinkedIn than I do in my own home. So
no.
Sadly, but
it's just another house.
Well,
thank you again for sharing your perspective and your journey and your everything. It's really nice to kind of to hear and to learn more. So thank you.
You too. Thanks for the chat. It's been awesome.